Hey, this is Dave. I'm back at Hilaire, and I have a voice analysis of a flight that I did a few weeks ago. This one's a little over an hour long. I actually made a deal that I would turn for the landing in 1 hour, so we'll look at that a little bit later on. But it's a day that took me a while, but I was able to get up above the back ridge and then make a crossing across the valley and then come into land. So right off launch, there's pretty strong lift right after launch, which you'll see me hit in just a moment. So at this site, you feel like you're flying, but you don't feel the real lift until you cross this tree line, which you're about to see. And then you're going to hear my Vario start making some crazy beeps. So all those beeps mean I'm in strong lift. So I'm going to start to turn into it. And as I remember on this day, I didn't want to get too far back too soon, so I'm just playing in front of the lift and just trying to get some altitude before I climb into it behind into the plateau. At this point, I wasn't sure how the day would be, so I had two plans in mind. One was to keep flying down the spine all the way to Grenoble, and the other idea was to try to climb up to the back spine and get enough altitude to make a valley crossing. Right now in front of me, you can see to the right, there's the AstroTurf launch. So we didn't use it this day, but it's a beautiful launch, really easy to use. And then straight below me, there's the waterfall that cascades down. There's usually some pretty good lift right over the spot that I'm entering now. So this is good, but I'm usually nervous to turn in it because it feels like I'm getting low over the trees when I complete the turn. So depending on how I feel and how the lift feels, sometimes I try it, sometimes I don't. I think at this point, because I'm not feeling a strong lift to get me up to the back spine, my mind is still on just going down this ridge as far as I can. So you can see to the left in the background is the back ridge, and my goal is to try to get up there if I can, because that gives enough altitude to make a valley crossing and know that you're going to get back. So at this point, I'm just feeling out the lift in front of the ridge and seeing if I have enough space and confidence to start finishing turns. So this, I think, is the first time that I've finished a 360. And depending on how I feel about the mapping of the thermal, I may try to ride it up, or I may just switch back to figure eights and up and down the ridge. I'm usually pretty conservative with how far I'll go before I start cranking into full circles. It's also a day that I wasn't too worried about staying up, so if I didn't take one thermal, I was pretty confident there'd be more. You can also see ahead of me there's a glider that's pretty high. All around me I can see other people and get some pretty good references for where I had to worry about finding lift and where I didn't. To the right now is the hang glider launch. You may have just caught a glimpse of it. I think I got the note too late, but maybe it'll come around again. So this is the place that the hang gliders launch from. It's this little ramp out into the middle of nowhere. A little scary. But they think what we do is scary too. You can see I'm going faster in this direction. So it's a south wind day. Okay, that one feels strong, so let's see what I do. It's been a couple of weeks, so I don't remember all the decisions I made on this flight, but it feels like this is one to turn in. And those little flat fields behind the trees were pretty good most of the times I flew, so I think what was probably on my mind at this time was to try to climb and let myself drift back over those dry fields, because I could see that other people had used those to get up much higher. Yeah, I'm kind of extending my turn out that direction. There's another glider in front of me, probably with the same plan. So now we can start using each other also. I can see every time I turn, I'll see if he is doing better than me or worse than me, and decide if I want to center more on him. Yep, so I'm actually a little bit higher now, so I was in the right spot. So maybe it'll be this one, maybe it won't, but the idea here is to ride this up as high as I can and see if it drifts me back to the point where I can catch stronger climbs to get above that spine. Yeah, so I'm drifting back a bit. Also heading slightly back toward launches. It seems like I'm out of it now. I probably left it behind me because I think it was a little further south than I am now. So maybe I'll try to come back and intersect it. But I'm always nervous about getting too low at this point, just not knowing when I'm going to hit the strong lift coming up the front of the face. So I'll probably push out in front and then do another lap and try this again. Now I'm heading into the wind, so things are going to be a little bit slower. So now I have more altitude. It's difficult to tell on the GoPro footage exactly how much clearance I have from those trees. Everything looks further away. But most likely I probably could have headed straight over that field and just got back into the climbs I was in. Just want to keep enough reserve altitude to push back in front of the cliff if I need to. It's possible to land on those fields, and I actually did one time, but I'd rather stay in the air. If I get in front of the cliff, I can climb back up. If I land on the field, then the flight's over. But right now I'm at a safe altitude that I don't really have to worry too much. I'm above the launches. I know there's lift out front, so I can kind of hunt around the town here in the village, watch what other people are doing, and see if I can find an opportunity to climb up. Yeah, I don't remember why I made this move so far north at this point without any lift, because the climbs that I had so far were all behind me. Maybe I was just exploring or saw something I wanted to fly by. It's not all about the climbs. You have to enjoy the flight also. So now I'm going to make another pass, but probably going to end up losing most of that altitude I gained. It looks to me, and I think I remember, that I'm not going to be able to get above those fields again on this pass, so I'm going to end up slipping to the left and getting in front of the ridge again, where there's some clear space to the left of me. So that buzzing sound is the sync alarm. So the buzzing means I'm going down faster than a certain threshold I set. So definitely don't want to hear that. But I know that if I push out here, I can get back into the pretty reliable areas of lift for the day. so not worried yet. And I get to make a pass in front of this cliff, which is really beautiful. There's some really, really beautiful rock outcrops that I love that have little trees on them. There's no way to get to them, but just this little towers of rock with a little forest, mini forest on top of them. So now I'm back in lift and just making my way back to roughly where I was before, but this time a little bit lower. About to pass that hang glider launch on the right. It's that little white spot, I think. No, maybe not. I think that's actually something else. Anyway, it's on the right here somewhere. It's a little bit of a tricky site if you're used to ridge soaring because it makes you feel like you can get right up against the cliff and just take the ridge lift. But you have to be very mindful of the fact that it's a thermic site, so you could be gently cruising along the ridge and then get whacked by a thermal and have no space to move. So I kept finding myself having to just check myself and pull myself away a little bit. But if you go too far away, then you're out of the lift band and it's difficult to stay up. So it's a balance of being close enough to get the lift within a margin of safety and also being ready to handle any issues that happen. At a pure thermic site, I never usually have to think about that. It's just these combination sites that they get tricky. But anything coming up this hill is actually thermic. There's no laminar air hitting it. And in the back, you can see those big cliffs that I'm trying to get to. They're about 1,000 meters above above the lower cliffs. So pretty much the same thing as before, trying to get altitude where I am, and then hoping it'll drift me back over the plateau where I can find something else. And you'll see it takes me a few cycles to do that, but when I finally get up to the top, I just remember this flight being really breathtaking. So for the less patient people, feel free to skip ahead. You can see a bunch of people down below me there, all trying to figure out how to get up or watching each other to see where the references are. So here I'm pushing over the plateau a bit, see what I can find there now that I have the altitude. So now I found something that's pretty strong, so I start my turns. I also have lots of ground clearance, so I'm hoping to ride this up as high as I can. Pretty much until I'm as high as I can or I find something better. So this is pretty much the same thing as last time. So it's the second round. Um, but I don't think this is the one that pays off either. I think this was just a second chance, and then I end up pushing forward to the next set of fields to actually get up to the top. Some people had asked me what instruments on my flight deck, so sometimes you can see them in the frame. I'm sure for other paraglider pilots they're familiar. But what I have on mine on the right is just my phone, and I have a flight instrument app that runs on the phone while I'm flying. And it's paired with a device on my shoulder to sense the exact location more precisely than the phone can, and also have much more precise tracking of whether I'm going up or down. So the beeps that you hear are actually coming from a device on my shoulder. You can't really see it, but just to the right of my phone, there's a little stylus that I velcro to the flight pad. So if I need to do anything on my phone, it's difficult with the gloves on. So I have a little stylus that I can grab that's velcroed. Immediately to the left of the phone is a Flymaster, which is a dedicated flight instrument. So I use that mostly now for just basic flight data. So what my altitude is, what my ground speed is. That's particularly important to make sure I know where the wind is coming from and whether I need to worry about a headwind that's too much for me to penetrate through. It has things like how long my flight is, a bunch of stuff. It's also the instrument that actually collects the flight data and submits it for my track log. That's all done automatically. To the left of that, it's moving around a lot, but you see a little round thing with some buttons on it. That's just a Bluetooth remote. And so a lot of times I play music in flight. I've got a little button there that I can push to start the music more easily than trying to mess with the stylus, because I don't like to spend much time with my hands off my controls. It also lets me switch pages on the navigation app that runs on my phone. So if I want to go to different pages for different navigational information, I can do that. And then below the round button, there is something else that I'm forgetting right now. Oh, it's a compass. Yeah, I have a compass. So I fly with a manual compass just for easy readability of direction, and also in the rare event that I find myself in a cloud, because I put myself in a cloud, I can exit more safely. I can keep a course heading and make sure that I come out of it. I mentioned that I have the shoulder instrument. Then the other electronics I fly with, on my chest harness, I have a radio. So we use 2-meter radios for communication with friends and also for emergencies. And then also on my chest harness, there's an inReach emergency satellite locator and emergency button. So if anything bad were to happen to me, if I need help, there's a button on there that I can push, and it uses satellite networks, so it'll work anywhere in the world, and the helicopter will come and hopefully save me. So those are all the instruments I fly with. Seems like quite a lot, considering that we're just flying with the sun and with gravity, but they all help in little ways. So yeah, now I'm pushing to the next set of fields, and these are the fields I end up getting the climb from, if I remember, but not immediately. And I remember seeing a couple of pilots that were above the little town to the right of the view right now, climbing up, and I knew there was something there, but I didn't have altitude myself to get to where they were. So I had to climb first before I can get to it, this town that you see on the right there. So now my plan is to get as much climb as I can so that I can position myself where they were, and then hope that what they found would still be there, or maybe a second cycle of what they found. You may even get a glimpse of them at some point coming into that town. They came from the other side and they already had higher altitude, so they were able to just glide right over to the spot that worked. Well, I don't see them yet, so it could be now, it could be a little bit later in the attempt. But as I remember, once I hook into that climb, it got me up to the top, or at least close enough that I could work my way up. I think I was pushing out there just because I didn't feel I had enough altitude margin if I fell out of a thermal. So when you find something close to the ground, it's good. You want to climb in it, but you have to be mindful that if you fall out of it, you have to think about what could happen. So in this case, landing is not a problem. If I fell out of it, I could just land, but that ends my flight. So I'd rather put myself in a position where if I fall out of it, I have space to get out in front of the cliff because I know there's going to be more lift there and I can make another attempt. So I'm never in a rush. If I don't feel like I'm in the right position, I'll wait a little bit and try again. Sometimes that bites me because I could miss the only opportunity. But I think more times than not, patience will help in paragliding. Sometimes the name of the game is just to stay in the air until something comes along. And if you start worrying because you can't find anything and you start going to different places to find it, um, what you really need to do is just wait and find something that's a good bet and just hold on as long as you can, especially if you're in some mild lift. Even if you're going down, the air could be going up, and so that could develop. So now I'm trying to be much more patient to wait for the right opportunity, especially if there's no time crunch. So they say you don't leave lift to find lift when you're low. So for me to leave a climb when I'm low, I've got to have a really good idea that there's something better to go to, or that I'm just in a bad position if it doesn't go well. So this sounds pretty good. I'm not sure if I saw those other gliders take the climb in the video, so it's possible that I missed it, or it's possible that this isn't the actual time that I got up, and it's just an earlier attempt, and we'll see them later on. But right now it's about 20 minutes into a 1 hour flight, like 1 hour and 15-minute flight. Um, so it's got to be soon because I need to get up on that spine relatively quickly, I think, for the timing to work on where I need it to be. Yeah, so I must have fallen out of it, or maybe it's possible also that the day's not really developed yet, and that I'm just hitting the tops of these climbs, although I don't think that was the case. I think it's more likely that I'm just falling out of them, or they're drifting away and I'm not keeping up with the drift. Yeah, I really think on this one that I probably needed to be further behind the town, and I've just been reluctant to push that far back into the plateau until I get higher up, and um, so I end up climbing up and just not staying with it far back enough. I need to do these. I need to do these analysis videos sooner after the flight, so I still remember things. Okay, this feels like pretty steady lift. So maybe I'll stay in this one and climb it up to the corner. At some point, that's what I do. I just don't remember which time. All right, so yeah, this is definitely the climb. So I must have missed where the other gliders flew by and nothing, but maybe it's going to be obvious in the video and for those who've watched it. So the goal now is to get up to the corner of that cliff. Ideally, find a climb that gets me all the way above it, but if not, get close enough that I can start going up and down that cliff looking for climbs that are coming from its own base. So for the people that are not paragliders, the way we go up is we find air that's going up. And if we could, we would just find that air and park in it and just come to a full stop and let it carry us up. But because we're not able to stop, the closest thing we can do to stopping is to make circles so that we're not moving very far. We just stay within that rising column of air. And some of those columns are very small, some are big, some are strong, some are weak, some are very uniform, and some are very ragged. There's lots of variability to them, so there's a lot of sensitivity and just intuition that you use to try to stay inside the best part of it while being as optimal in your lift as possible. If you make it a very aggressive bank turn, it's pretty easy to stay in a very small area with a lot of stability in the glider, but you don't climb as well. So if it's a very small, strong thermal, that's the right thing to do. If it's a very weak thermal, then it's not worth it, and then you flatten out a little bit. But if it's weak and small, that makes it very difficult. And sometimes you don't stay in it for the full circle, and you just try to make a pass through it each time around. the thermals at this site I found were pretty large and not too strong. Most days we were there, the strong thermals were 2 to 3 meters per second, and on the strong side. A couple days I did hit things that were 5 or 6 meters per second, but mostly they were more like 2 to 3, and a lot of times just 1 to 2. So those are not really strong thermals, and they tended to be very wide with lots of lift all over the place. So it was a place where if you fell out of one, you didn't worry too much. So now I've left that thermal and I'm heading towards the spine, towards the corner of the spine. But there's lift on the way over there, so it's a lifty line. Maybe I turned it, I don't remember. Um, but as long as I'm in lift and the lift's getting stronger, I'll keep going straight. And if that takes me up to the cliff, then that's a good thing. Right, so what's happened is I've got to the spine, didn't really find anything to get me up the corner, so now I'm heading in front of it. Um, so I'm not up there, but I'm in a better position than before because I'm up this slope, and so lift will come up the slope, and I can use that lift to push towards the base of the cliff and then find something stronger there. And that's what happens in this case. So right now I'm just trying to keep the altitude I have, going laterally along these foothills, along the slope, and looking for something that'll get me up higher. And you can hear it. You can hear that I'm in lift this whole time. So hopefully this carries me into even better lift, and then I can make my way up to the top. Yeah, I remember seeing these little horizontal lines. I'm not sure exactly what they are. I think they're to stop falling rock or something. But anyway, I remember seeing them and thinking, they would pay off. And I'm not sure why, just some kind of intuition, but they did. Or at least something around them did. So now I'm doing some figure eights. I'm a little bit too close to that wall to make turns. I also don't want to be doing full 360s up against the cliff until I feel the air a little bit more, and know what the direction really is and what it could be doing against the faces of the cliff. So I just pulled a 360 there. So now I have altitude and I guess some comfort. I'm getting used to what the cliff feels like. So I'll ride this one up and see how high it takes me. And if you didn't skip ahead, there's a big payoff for all the time watching me trying to get up there. And once I'm up, the view is just incredible. One thing that often surprises people that haven't been paragliding is how long the flights can be. And so I think especially if they've experienced skydiving or they just see us go down the mountain, they think in terms of minutes that maybe you take off at the top and float down to the bottom and land. And a lot of our flights are that. But as you can see, that as long as the sun is heating the ground, we're able to stay up. And so this flight is about an hour and 15 minutes, and my average flights on this trip were closer to 2 hours, and my longest flight is 6.5 hours. And there are people that have flown for 11, 12 hours and setting world records. So we can stay in the air as long as there's something to move us upwards. Okay, so now I'm about the altitude of the top of that back spine. Not sure if you remember what it looked like from earlier in the flight, but it was this towering cliff way, way above and behind. And now we're there. And still climbing. The hills behind the spine, well, the spine itself also is part of the Chartreuse set of mountains. And somewhere back there is the monastery where the monks make Chartreuse liquor. And I went there on the trip, and very cool little place. I couldn't see the monks because they live a secluded life. So they have an area that they live and work, and then there's a more public place a couple 100 meters away. So you can see how vertical and how jagged this terrain is. And so in my mind, when I see that, I'm always wondering where the rough air could be, where the little torrents of air or loads of air could be, so that I don't put myself in a dangerous situation. It's a little bit awkward here because you want to get the climb though, and the climbs often come off the back of it, where the sun bakes these sloping plateaus. But then there's also rising air coming from the front of it, especially earlier in the day when the face is more in the sun, and also just lift coming off the plateau that we just climbed up. So when those different air masses all hit and mingle, it can get a little bit rowdy. So as high as I can get here, that's better, because the more altitude I have, the safer I am, the further away I am from the ground, and the more options I have for traveling. So now I'm about 40 minutes into the flight. If you remember, I'd given myself an hour before I was going to turn and head back towards the landing zone. So with about 20 minutes left, at some point I want to be able to cross the valley, knowing that I can get there and then turn to get to the landing. And you can see also, once I got high here, it just became easy. All the lift from all those different sources is all moving up, and it's all combining, and it's combining into more stronger bubbles. You just heard the barrier go nuts. So I'm not sure what the climb rate is at this point. Probably only 2 to 3 meters per second. But compared to what I was getting earlier, it's really good. The clouds are indicating the top of lift. So conceivably I could get to where the clouds are. Not easy to do that, and probably don't need it, but that gives me a rough idea of how high I should be able to get. And you can see now with all this altitude I have, everything looks tiny on the ground, but I can also see different opportunities. I can see where the shadows are from the clouds. So now I can start thinking about what the clouds are doing instead of looking for things on the ground. I can also see clear across the valley. I can see other pilots, and I can see them from above, so I can plan where I want to be. So now I'm actually going straight down the spine. I'm in a lifty line, so I'll just kind of end and lift, and I can go straight. I'll take it. So I could have turned in that and probably taken a few extra 100 meters of altitude, maybe get it up to the clouds. But at this point, knowing that I only have 20 minutes left, my plan was to head down the spine a bit so that I could make a crossing across the valley and get back. I already have plenty of altitude to make that move. So in the background, you can see there are 3 humps on the other side of the valley, and usually the point to connect to on the other side of the valley is the leading, or I guess the northern tip of the 3rd hump. So if I'd wanted to get across the valley and actually try to climb up there, that's what I would aim for. And to do that, I would go north a little bit more, actually quite a lot more, and then have an easier crossing of the valley, intersect that point, get more climbs, and then get back into the big mountains on the other side of the valley. And the mountains on the other side of the valley are a whole other level of size and scale. But on this flight, because I'm not planning to try to establish any climbs on the other side, I take a shortcut, which is probably going to come out relatively soon. There's also some airspace that I have to be careful of. So a little bit south of where I am now, and in the valley, there's an airport, and we have to be careful not to violate that airspace. At the altitude I am in now, I could probably cross right on top of it. I believe it was 1,600 meters was the top of airspace, and right now I'm probably at around 2,400 meters, which is about 7,500 feet, maybe 8,000 feet for the people that don't speak meter. So I could have crossed that airspace if I wanted to, but there's really no reason to worry about it. With the climb I'm in now, I can keep heading the direction I'm going, towards Chambéry, and also towards Lake Annecy, and then I can make the crossing well away from the airspace. Right, things are mellowing out a little bit now. I'm still in lift, so I'm still going up, but not quite as strongly as before. But this is a really nice situation where you can go in a straight line, downwind, and not lose altitude. It's the best of all worlds. Good day, a little bit to the right of the screen, you'll be able to see Mont Blanc, which is I believe, the tallest mountain in the Alps and maybe in Europe. And it's possible to fly there, fly up, all the way up and over it, if the conditions are right, and people have landed on it. And sometimes that turned out well, and sometimes not so well. So now they're very restrictive about it. There was a famous day a couple of years ago where about 200 pilots landed on it, um, and a lot of them were not equipped to get off it. So the rescue crews decided they didn't want that to ever happen again. So now they're being more restrictive. So people landing on a very high alpine mountain with wearing running shoes and shorts, sometimes flip-flops, and just not equipped to handle anything if they were not able to take off again. All right, so here I pushed away from the ridge a little bit, just see what I can find a little further away, and probably trying to decide at this point whether I just want to make the valley crossing, given that I'm at 50 minutes into my flight, so I have 10 minutes to make the crossing, and then start heading to the landing. It's difficult to make a promise of when you'll land because you never want to rush a landing or force a landing. Sometimes you have to stay up a little bit to wait for conditions to calm down, or sometimes you just have to deal with different situations. So I don't like to promise when I'll land, but I can promise when I'll head back. Okay, I'm in sync now. So I'm in sync, and I don't want to take time to try to make the climb, and I have plenty of altitude here. It's probably the right time to make the crossing, unless I have a really strong belief that there's a climb ahead of me. There are some clouds forming, so that's an indication that there could be a climb there. But at the same time, do I want to spend time struggling for a climb at this point where I already have the altitude for the crossing and I have a limited time window? So we'll see what I decide because I don't remember. Okay, I've switched to rear riser steering, so I'm probably using my speed bar at this point to get maybe to the cloud just to give it a chance. Okay, I'm looking to the crossing, so I would imagine that I'm about to make the move. Yeah, I'm definitely checking things out over there. All right, yep. So it looks like I'm making the move. So the point that I'm aiming for is going to be on that third hump. So yeah, the hump right in front of me. I know the screen's moving around a lot, but right in front of me there's a hump, and ideally I can get to that hump to get altitude on the other side. Taking the chance to look around me, and you can see from my feet where I'm aiming. So I want to get to where that ridge is. Not expecting to spend any time over there. My goal is probably just to get over that land and then head back. So you can hear that the wind is a little bit louder now. I'm heading on a pass, so probably a little bit of speed bar and trying to go a little bit faster. I don't see any speed bar pushed, but I am on rear risers, so probably working on that. Go back to brakes. It could be here that I felt some lift and decided to make some more turns, and it looks like that's what's happening. Yeah, this is a nice climb, so I think I just took a moment to see if I can top up before making the actual crossing. It's always a decision as to whether to top up first and get there higher, or to go with the altitude you have and get there sooner, and hope you find something on the other side. In this case, I'm not in a race, there's no reason to get there faster. So if I found a nice climb before I made the crossing and there's no indication over there that there's any lift, I don't see anybody ahead of me, or I know that's a good spot to go to, but there's no way to know how it's going to be when I get there. So if I find something here, I may as well fill up the tank, get some altitude, and then use that altitude to get on the other side a little bit higher. You can also see that I'm pretty high. I'm higher than the back ridge that I was working. And I have a good feeling by now for the day of what the top altitude is for each climb. So if I'm in lift and it feels strong and I'm a few hundred meters below what I remember top of lift to be, then it's reasonable that I would expect to be able to make a good climb out of it. Just a stunning look at the valley as I turn around. You can see this huge ridge, which looks a little bit smaller now because I'm above it. From the ground it looks immense. You can see all the way up and down the valley, the two cities on each end. You can see across, you can see the big mountains. It's just spectacular. I'm not sure what the height is at this point, but I would guess it's around 2,700 meters. So that's about, I don't know, somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 feet. Alright, so now I'm back on the crossing, and I'm on speed bar. You can see that the pulley is stretched out, and I'm using my rear risers to steer. So that's a little bit more efficient and makes me go faster. Sacrifice a little bit of a glide. My glider is a Phi Beat, which is a mid-range B. So it's not the most performant glider when it's on speed bar, but it does make a difference. And I have a riser upgrade, so the risers I have a special connection for the B risers. So there's kind of a proportional pull when I pull the C's, and the B's come down a little bit also, in proportion to the C pull. So it kind of emulates a kind of the flat pitch control of a two-liner, obviously without all the same benefits, but maybe the closest they could get with three-liners. So as I remember, there's a little bit of a headwind, so it makes sense for me to try to add a little bit of speed bar to cut through the headwind and get a better glide. But with the instrument I have, I'm usually looking at my glide angle and trying to optimize with more or less speed bar, considering the wind and the lift, and seeing if I can. The goal is to get to the other side with as much altitude as I can in this case, since I'm not in a rush. And the view of the valley just gets better and better as I cross it. And you can see that ahead of me there's the low ridge that I'm aiming for, and then behind that there's another ridge, another line that's a little bit higher than that. You can see that now. And then behind that there are the big mountains. So usually the strategy here, if you were going to continue the flight, is to get to the first one that you meet, actually a little bit more to the left of where I'm aiming. Since I'm planning to turn around for the landing anyway, I'd rather stay a little bit to the right. But normally you go to the left end of it, and you'd use that to bench up as high as you can, and then use that altitude to cross over to the next, the middle ridge, which is a little bit higher. And at that point you have a choice. Generally you take a right, so you start heading south, and that ridge actually has a kind of an uphill angle to it, and so you follow that up and connect to the big mountains a little bit to the south. Or if you feel confident, you can just push straight back to those big mountains from the second ridge. And then once you get to the big ones, you gain altitude and just kind of decide where you want to go from there. From the first hump that I'm going to hit, and also from the middle one, even if you don't find anything, you have enough altitude to get back to landing. I'm probably about halfway now. It's a little bit difficult to see, but I would guess about halfway. It's really not a good direction to be if I wanted to stay in the air. I'd want to be a little more to the left so I could get high on that first bump. But for what I'm doing today, my goal was just to touch it and go back, so it should be okay. I wanted just to get a valley crossing in the books on this flight. But with the altitude I have right now, I could probably have a really good flight if I decided to continue. Getting to the other side, benching up, and maybe even getting back to those big mountains. Or if you keep going south, there's a site called Chamrus, which is really good in the afternoon. So getting to that, the sun kind of hits it after around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and just starts baking the mountain on that side and making it really good for flying. On this trip, I didn't actually get all the way to Chamrus. One time I got close, and then it got pretty rough, so I decided to just head in. But I did fly Chamrus when we started there. I just didn't fly to it. So every now and then I'm looking to my right. It's good to look for traffic, but mostly I'm looking where the landing is and make sure I still feel comfortable that I can glide to it, that I have enough altitude. But I also have that landing programmed into my instrument. That's probably what I'm adjusting right now. So the instrument will tell me also if I'm going to make it. So based on current wind speed and altitude and the glide angle I'm achieving, it'll tell me if I'm going to be able to get there. It's not really that reliable because all those variables can change as I make the flight. I think right now I'm actually selecting that. I can't see the screen, but I'm probably actually working on the navigation to tell it to navigate me to the landing. I'll then look over to it. Alright, so it looks like I'm turning around, across the valley, and left myself plenty of altitude to get back. And now the view is going to be really nice because you're going to see Saint Hilaire and the whole Chartreuse area in the background. And unlike seeing it from the ground, you can actually see that back ridge and how huge it is. From the ground, you see the front ridge, and you look up, and that's huge. But it's not until you drive up and look up from there that you see, oh, there's a whole other step to it, depending on which angle, but at least from the landing. So I'm pretty much heading straight towards the landing area now, or straight towards that spine. And my goal is to get to it with enough altitude to check the landing area, get a sense of the wind direction, all those types of things, and make sure I'm set up for a safe landing. I don't remember if I went directly to land on this flight or not, so we're going to find out together when it gets to that. So I was talking a minute ago about the speed bar. So for the people that are not pilots, we have it's kind of like a stirrup or like a strap inside the harness that we can push with our feet, and it's connected to these pulleys. And you can see the pulleys where the glider connections are. There's kind of a string that you can just make out in the video, and that's attached to a pulley. And when we push with our feet, that pulls down the leading edge of our paraglider. So it pulls on the leading lines, and a little bit on the next lines, so it has an even tilt of the angle of attack. So it makes a lower angle of attack, which makes us go just a little bit faster. But it's also a little bit less lifty, so we're trading a little bit of lift for altitude. I'm sorry, for velocity.
This is Dave. I'm heading back across the valley to land at
So the speed bar gives us a little bit of pitch control, but not a lot. Not like other aircraft, not like powered aircraft. But we do have a little bit of pitch control, and then we can affect the other angles. We can roll using our weight shift, and we can yaw using our brakes. And they kind of all combines together to make our turns. We don't have a tail like an aircraft or like an airplane, so we don't really have true yaw, but we kind of affect the lift of the glider on each side such that it slows down one side or the other, and that makes it yaw. But most of the roll is actually happening through weight shift. So generally we lean a little bit to the left and pull the left brake, and that'll make the glider roll to the left and then yaw around the turn. So now I should be pretty confident that I'm going to make the landing. It's right, so that gully straight ahead of me right now, if you follow that down and then a little bit closer than the gully, the landing is kind of where my toes are right now. I'm probably going to get there even above that cliff height. So if I'd wanted to, I could head to the cliffs and probably get back up again and do some more flying. But I'm pretty sure I have other plans today. Alright, so I've pretty much gotten all the way back to launch, and now I'm heading towards the landing. I probably wanted to just close off the triangle to get maximum distance points for this little mini triangle that I did. The wind makes it sound like I'm going really fast, but paragliders are pretty slow. I think my speed on this glider is probably around 20 miles an hour. So close to a speed of a fast bicycle ride is the speed that you're moving. That's the speed through the air, so it's always going to feel about the same. But the speed over the ground depends on that airspeed. So if you're going downwind, you can take that 20 miles an hour and add it to whatever the wind speed is. So if you're flying in 10 mile an hour wind, at 20 miles an hour, you're going 30 miles an hour over the ground. So I was just taking a look down there to make sure I knew the wind direction and to see if I see other people landing, and now I'm pulling into a spiral, so the wind speed is going to go way up. This spiral, I just checked the stats, this spiral went to about 9 meters per second. So at the maximum descent velocity of this spiral, I'm going down about 9 meters per second. And so I'm probably going, I don't know, 90 miles an hour through the air. So it's a huge speed difference, and you feel the G-forces. It's difficult to hold it for a long time. If I were to go all the way into a deep spiral, then probably could get close to 20 meters per second down. But that's pretty uncomfortable. Not something I'm great at doing for a sustained period of time yet. So as I came out, I actually flew through my own wake. That's why you heard the little rustle of the glider. So now I've lost enough altitude that I can just do an easy setup for my landing. If I hadn't done that spiral, it would probably take me 10 or 15 minutes to come down. I was pretty high and it was a good lifty day. Maybe not that long, but several minutes. And now I can watch some other people land, get a sense of the wind direction. There are also some windsocks there. I don't like to assume that other people are landing in the correct direction because they may have misread the windsock. But it does help me get a rough idea, especially if I see a few people do it. And then once they land and they're on the ground, you can tell a lot about the wind direction from how their glider behaves. If it just collapses directly straight behind them, then they probably had the right wind direction. If it gets pulled to the side, or if it even goes forward, then they had the wrong wind direction. So I like to poke my feet out a little bit out of the harness because that makes it much easier to get all the way out, and it just reassures me that I don't have my feet snagged on one of the speed bar lines or one of the harness lines. If I do that at the last minute and my foot's caught, there's not much I can do about it, and then I'll trip and fall when I land. So I poke my feet out a little bit, and then I like to get out of the harness early. So we call this our landing gear. And so like an airplane, you want to have your landing gear down early so that if you drop a little bit when you're landing, your feet are already out and your legs are already out. If my legs aren't out and I drop, I'm going to take the impact on my spine, which is not designed to take any kind of impact. There's no cushioning in it. But if my legs are out, then I can cushion the drop with my legs. And there's no reason not to have your legs out, so I'll just hang out of the harness at the end. So here I am pushing out. So now I'm suspended by my leg straps. My legs are hanging out, so my legs are ready to absorb the landing. It's also a little bit more of a wind drag, so it'll slow me down a little bit too, whereas the pod is designed to be very efficient. very efficient shape, an aerodynamic shape, but my whole body right now just suspended into the airstream. It's going to provide a lot more resistance. So that slows me down a bit. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, depending on the wind speed. In this case, it doesn't really make a difference. So now I'm just setting up. We don't have an engine, so I can't go around if I have the angle wrong. So I'm just kind of waiting until I feel I have the right angle, and then I can turn directly into the wind. And I position myself such that I can land where I want to land. So it's a mountain site, so I like to come in really fast and then just wait till the end to bring myself to a stop. There it is, a couple steps, and I turn around, bring the glider down, and we're done. So as I said in other videos, I'm not an expert, I'm an amateur trying to get better at this. So if you see anything in there that you feel is wrong, please correct it in the comments. If you have any advice, put that in the comments too, and thanks for watching.